So I'm going to introduce the transportation panel, but before I do that, I want to acknowledge David May. This is probably our last opportunity in this session or in this summit to do that. As many of us know, David May is leaving the Fort Collins Chamber of Commerce after 17 and a half wonderful years as our president and CEO. David is just an exceptional executive. He was a Chamber Executive of the Year in Missouri in his younger days, and then Florida, and then Colorado, and then the Western U.S. Chamber Executive of the Year. His leadership of Northern Colorado, Fix Colorado Roads, Northern Colorado Prospers, Fix I-25, Reigniting Our Economy have been spectacular. Under his leadership, the Fort Collins Chamber of Commerce is the only five-star chamber in Colorado. So with that, David, I'm introducing you. We're saying goodbye to you in a way, although we know you're staying in the area and you're going to stick around and help us out. But with that, I'll turn the transportation piece over to you.
Thank you, Steve, and thank you for the kind remarks. I really appreciate it. So this panel is on transportation, and let me very quickly, to catch up a little bit of time, run through these fairly fast. But NCLA has made this a priority for a period of years. The basic goal that we have is to secure the funding to get I-25 widened to 3 lanes each way between Highway 14 in Fort Collins to Highway 66 north of Longmont, and have that money in place by 2025. And you can see a variety of elements to that. You'll also notice the last bullet point here. We talk about the fact that while we're focused on I-25, we know we've got some regional and secondary roads that need attention as well. So the panel we're going to have today, I'm going to make a few introductory remarks, and then Shoshana Liu, the Executive Director for CDOT, is joining us today, and then Greg Fulton, the President of the Colorado Motor Carriers Association. This data is from Common Sense Institute. If you're not familiar with them, you may want to check them out. And this is a study they produced in July. And what's important here is you can see the trend lines in terms of vehicle miles traveled, which is the green line here. You can see the blue line, which is population. And this is over a 15-year window from around 2001 to 2015. But then this orange line is the money shot. And this is the one where you basically show we're not adding any lane mile capacity into the state of Colorado. So another chart from them shows this in a financial sense, where you see the HUTF population and construction index is the orange line, and then the actual collections is this blue line. And so there is a funding gap in this state that we all are aware of, and it's a major challenge. What does that do for North I-25? Obviously, we feel that situation. We do not have the funds to get I-25 widened completely, or haven't had. And when you look at the cement that's out there, until the climbing lane was built on Berthoud Hill a few years ago, that's the first time any capacity has been added to North I-25. That there's 3 years more of dollars in the pipeline, and after that, we don't have any funding in place. We've catalyzed these dollars. You can see basically here on this chart how this lays out over a period of time, the funding that I mentioned, but it's been consistent work by a lot of people at the federal, state, and local community level to make this happen, and that's what it requires, that kind of consistent effort. One of the things that we figured out early on in our process is if we're going to help the state fix its problem, we're going to have to, or fix our problem on I-25, we're going to have to help them fix their funding problem. So We've been very focused on helping the state. We created a group called Fix Colorado Roads. It's been advocating for state funding. We've been very persistent in supporting this effort for the state of Colorado. It's generated about $3.75 billion in general funds or finance dollars over the past 6 years. And we've been very consistent in being an advocate of the legislature using some of their general fund dollars for transportation. This is where that $3.75 billion has come from. And again, this is Fix North I-25, Fix Colorado Roads. The I-25 Coalition have really made state transportation funding a priority because we knew that we couldn't get what we needed without helping the state address its challenge. The future, we're looking at general fund monies, stay focused there, identify any financially and politically viable new revenue streams. Electric vehicles are increasingly popular, but they are not paying their way, and yet they're pounding the roads like the rest of us. Look at gas tax, other funding sources. Sandra just asked about the federal infrastructure funding. And so hopefully there's a bill that will be coming out of Congress in 2021. Don't let the express toll lanes be used free by electric vehicles. And that's not about being anti-electric vehicle. It's just conflicting priorities. The priority here is to make sure that we are keeping the capacity for toll lanes. We've got guaranteed travel times. We may need to look at local funding options like RTAs, bonding, and so on. Key point here is we're not done. We still need $450 to $650 million for North I-25, and we need to stay focused on this challenge. This is definitely a team sport. There are a lot of people that deserve a lot of credit. I don't have time to share all their names today, but really appreciate the leadership in Northern Colorado from our local government officials. We've had a great partnership with CDOT and others around the state. And we've got three of those. We got two panelists with us today that have been partners of ours in this effort as well. And one of them is Shoshana Liu. Shoshana is the executive director of CDOT, and Greg Fulton, who is the president of the Colorado Motor Carriers. And I want to introduce, as I tee them up, I want to have them address a couple of things. What's next and how do we get I-25 funded is obviously on my mind. And that gets to the larger funding issue in the state. This discussion we just had about electrification and the carrier industry, what does that mean to Colorado? So starting out, Shoshana Liu was appointed executive director of CDOT in December of 2018. Prior to that, she was the chief operating officer of the Rhode Island Department of Transportation and chief financial officer and assistant secretary for budget and programs for the U.S. Department of Transportation, among other duties there. She's a graduate of Harvard and Northwestern University, and she has worked in a variety of other roles in the federal government. Greg Fulton is the president of the Colorado Motor Carriers, which is an organization of 650 companies either directly involved in trucking or are affiliated to trucking. And Greg has been the executive director for that association for 17 years, and he has been a trusted partner of ours in this whole issue of funding for transportation. So I'm going to turn it over to Director Liu.
Thank you, David. And first, I would just like to add to the chorus of thanks to you for everything. And I know I haven't worked with you for quite as long as many of the people in this virtual room, but it's really been a pleasure. And we'll miss you when you make your transition, and hope we'll all find ways to continue collaborating.
Thank you.
Just a quick word of introduction, and I know we want to spend most of the time today doing a dialogue back and forth with you and Greg. I think this is such a kind of fitting time to be having this conversation about transportation and about how we make the investments that we need, for our economy and for the movement across Colorado. I think when we entered into this economically challenging time that you've heard much about today, everyone here knew that transportation was an important part of how we make the economy move. But I think we've only seen those patterns sort of come to fruition and clarity, in an even more pronounced way over the course of the recession over the past couple of months. I think it's fitting to be here with my colleague Greg, because one of the things that the world has seen is just how central trucking is to every aspect of our lives. Look no further than the Amazon Prime truck in front of one's home to sort of see that the shape of retail is changing and that the freight economy is, growing but evolving in different ways, where, we have an opportunity in Colorado to, be leaders in that space and be ahead of thinking through, what a real 21st century freight economy looks like. Our roads are a big part of that, because whether it is single occupancy travel, electric vehicles, conventional vehicles, trucks, cars, they all use the roads, and we need that strong foundation in order to have the system that we all rely on. I think something else that we've seen, and this touches on a point that Senator Bennett made in his remarks, is that I think we've all seen the kind of clarity with which our transportation infrastructure and our natural resources come together over these past months. In the governor's budget that was released last week, there's a stimulus package that you'll doubtless hear more about over the course of today. But one of the central elements of that was a proposed $220 million investment in infrastructure, of which the majority is transportation, but it also includes infrastructure for our parks. And I think it's so fitting that those two things fit together, because the system of roads that we have is central to everything about our way of life, but especially in this time where the outdoors is so much the way that we're continuing to move during COVID, that we've seen pressures on rural roads that never had that kind of pressure before. So, I think the focus in our 10-year plan on a whole transportation system for Colorado, both the interstates and the major arteries of the Front Range, but also the system of rural roads across the state that we rely on for freight and for recreation and for the tourism economy that's such an important part of our state. I think the relevance of that has also become even clearer during this time. I will turn it back to you, and knowing that Greg probably has some remarks as well.
Great, thank you, Director Liu. So we'll now turn over to Greg.
Thank you very much, David. I want to echo, what others have said. I think I've worked with you for several years, and I've got to tell you, you truly are an outstanding, association exec and a leader, and have been a champion in this transportation issue. I just want to thank you. Also want to end up, thanking my old friend, Representative Steve Toole, actually. And Steve, I work with one of the probably best legislators that I've ever worked with down at the legislature. And somebody who's been a great advocate. And also thank you to Sandra. She's a great voice for you in terms of the NCLA, and she does a terrific job. She's been carrying a lot of water. But let me note that I would just mention in terms of our end of it, and can I just share a slide here, David? Is that all right? Oh,
I believe you can.
Okay, and I'm just going to do this right now. I'm just going to end up sharing just, if I can find my end of it there. Let me do this. This is it. Okay, I'm just going to share this one. And I don't know how I can structure that, but I don't want to be blocking out the whole screen there, but I'm not very good at doing this sort of thing. Okay. I do want to mention that, we've all recognized as Director Liu, and it's always great to share the, sort of, I guess, the screen these days with Director Liu. She's done a terrific job at CDOT. She's the only director that I know that has visited every county, and she's worked closely with us in our industry towards solving a lot of the problems. And I think, we're very fortunate to have her, and, hoping that she'll stay with us. I'll just say that too. And there's appeals or whatever come forward on that. But
so Greg, sorry to interrupt you, but are you sharing your screen?
I am actually, but it doesn't seem to be. Okay, let me do that. Sure. Okay, let me do this. Is that there? Is it showing now, David?
There you go. You got it.
Okay,
yep.
Great. Sorry about that. Okay, I would just say that when we talk about the impact of this, this just is, we're going to even see this even more, because in the last few months, since this pandemic, we've all become so much more dependent on home deliveries and the trucking industry out there. Even today, right now, you're probably starting to hear again that we tend to end up having people going into a panic mode, which means that, the great toilet paper shortage of 2020 is coming back to us, along with the Clorox self-wipes and things like that. Those items are there. We don't really have a shortage. We have a shortage of the ability to move that, enough product fast enough in this environment. But a part of that is really the infrastructure that we have. It's an aging infrastructure. It costs us millions of dollars in additional costs every day due to the congestion. And not only due to the congestion, but also when we have bridges that are not actually up to par in terms of structurally, or they can't bear the weight on this because they've deteriorated. Roadways where we end up even actually having lanes where trucks can't go on because they're so deteriorated. And even the challenge of actually maintaining this network and actually having enough people and equipment actually to plow our highways and other things. I think CDOT's done an outstanding job, and Director Liu is to be commended, but you can only do so much without having enough money. Yes. I think maybe David pointed to this, but this really echoes it. And I will say, like a great phrase that previous director Shailen Bhatt had mentioned. He said, we've got a great highway network for 3 million people. And he said, then he went on to say, the problem is we've got over 5 million people. And so the thing here is, as you've seen, we have not stayed current. And I-25 North is a testament to that. And so I would just kind of echo the need for this. I would say that, Sandra and us and the NCLA group have looked at different ideas. We have been supportive of fuel tax or some sort of, fee in lieu of that could be applied to fuel as a surrogate in this environment. We've also encouraged looking at what we said, the specific ownership tax, which is was last changed in 1975 and doesn't adequately reflect actually in terms of the base of vehicles that we have. And we think that's an opportunity as well. And I would share the mention that David mentioned, is that electric vehicles, and we'll be looking at a lot of electric vehicles in our industry as well in the future. Right now, they're not contributing to the Highway User Tax Fund, and it's critical that they become a part of that as well. So I'll leave it at that, David, and move on. I mean, I'm happy to talk. I even have some slides on the electric vehicles and other things if you'd like, but I'll throw it back to you if that's all right.
Great, Greg. Thank you very much. Thanks for your kind comments as well. So we're a little behind schedule, but maybe as you unshare your slide there, Greg, thank you. We'll have, let me just put this question in front of you and you, Director Liu, which is, what's it going to take to fund Colorado highways? And it's a large question, I understand, but maybe we can talk about what are our options maybe for 2021 in a really tough environment, economic environment. So maybe Director Liu, we could start with you. How are we going to fund our highways?
Sure, and it's a multivariable question with a lot of parts, as you know. I continue to think that the first prerequisite to having a good plan to fund the highways is to have a good plan, right? To have a tight plan and to be able to be disciplined about what our priorities are and how to kind of keep our eye on the ball, whether it's for an I-25, a Floyd Hill, a 270, or the vast network of rural roads across the state that is badly in need of being sort of brought up to modern conditions. That's why we spent really the first year plus of my time here working with folks across the state to develop, a 10-year plan that doesn't do everything, but that has a discrete set of projects that will make a big difference. I-25 is the single largest investment in that plan. In order to be able to know what we're focused on and to be able to talk to day-to-day people about the results. I think that in terms of this year and the years beyond, thinking through both what we can do in the immediate term, and that's where the conversation about stimulus has the opportunity to be a shot in the arm, but also how we stabilize our revenue structure moving forward. So that, as to your point, we get to a space where there's a more broader balance between electric and conventional vehicles. We're talking about a revenue stream that captures those funds. So that as we talk about new technologies using the roads, we're in a space where applications of technology we haven't thought of are sort of paying into the system for the impact that they have. But in the immediate term, I think that really honing in on this opportunity to explain to people how transportation both is stimulative unto itself and also sets a foundation for future growth is a big part of the narrative right now. And that's something that we've been focused on throughout this crisis, is helping to take all the work that we've done up until COVID and really translate it for the moment that we're in, that it's not just still important, but even more important.
Thank you. Back to you, Greg.
Thank you, David. I think Director Liu hit on a lot of the points. I would say the real key here is, we start out with, I think everybody in the legislature realizing that we need additional funding. And the real question then comes down to, okay, where is that going to come from? Secondly, some question whether we need new funding whatsoever. Others are saying, okay, how those funds are spent. I think we need to keep this simple. First off, I think, because we need consensus. It needs to be a bipartisan bill. Secondly, I think, things like you keep off the table is you keep the existing funding formula between the state and the city and counties the same as how those funds are allocated. I think third is the point that you agree that we have a statewide transportation plan. We don't try to add certain things, and we tie actually the fact in terms of the funding, saying that this is going to actually be put toward those projects. I think the fourth element is we've got to be reasonable, particularly in these times. I do believe we can get a funding package through there, but it's going to be something that is going to be a huge package. It's going to be something that needs to grow over time. But it has to look at the technologies as we move forward. If we're going to have EVs and other elements and other newer technologies out there, we need to account for those and actually build them into that overall package. But simplicity, focus, and actually agreeing that we do need additional funds coming into the system that'll be dedicated there is, I think, critical. And I think the last piece is I do think everyone's saying we need to have skin in the game. The state legislature and the state government's going to have to end up, we think, having some state funding be part of that contribution, which, and I mean by state funding, and I mean some general fund monies to kind of end up helping to, make up that difference. So that's part of my view. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Greg. So, Director Liu, final question for you. Is there any chance, in your opinion, that we'll get to the spot where we're taking money away from highways to fund rail? Is that remotely a threat?
I think the conversation about Front Range Rail is very separate from the conversation about the basis of our 10-year plan. I don't think anyone thinks that the funds for the basic transportation program should be on the table. And I think that the way that we constructed our 10-year plan, makes them very separate, right? There are related policy questions. How we use a reconstructed I-25 is, related to having more options for transportation. In our 10-year plan, for example, we proposed using some of the multimodal options fund elements to do, bus rapid transit along I-25 North, much like we've seen great success with on US 36. That's separate, but also, sort of conceptually related to the broader conversation, about what a Front Range Rail corridor could look like. But, in the planning that is happening for what the Front Range Rail corridor could look like, all presumes that there would be a vote of the people specifically related to the funding for that project. So, I don't think that they're in direct competition in that way.
Very good. Okay, thank you. Well, I'll wrap this up, and I'll just say thank you to both of you. And we've been very fortunate. We've been very fortunate in our, we've been very fortunate in having both of you as leaders in our state and advocates for transportation. I know as I look back over the last few years, just the chance to work with both of you has been a real pleasure, and we really appreciate you both. And so from our audience perspective, just stay focused on transportation. It's a huge issue for us, and NCLA is committed to this, and we appreciate your help when we put out a call for action to contact your legislators and others.